Hello, my name is Hannah Cooper, and my focus is on Seattle's preschool program, early childhood education, as well as Seattle public schools as a whole. So I chose this demographic because this is where my expertise lies and also where my focus is public early childhood education. So that can be pre-K, kindergarten, first grade. I love this age because in many cases it's their first relationship to schooling, and that's why we need really incredible teachers at this age to um, allow kids to fall in love and really become the students that they can all be. Um, I hope to teach in an inclusive classroom, so that includes learners that are disabled and not disabled. That exposure to each other really benefits all learners. Inclusion in Seattle public preschools. So the inclusion rate in the Seattle public preschool classrooms is not great. 6 out of 54 classrooms, special education inclusion. The ratio teacher to child is 18 to 2, and there is a floating special education specialist that goes within the classrooms and gives educational support to students as well as educators. Seattle public preschool program is actually free for all low-income families, which is amazing. The cost of private preschool in Seattle is out of this world. So this is a small step into really supporting lower income workers and families that need the support of universal pre-K. I'll talk later about universal pre-K, but this program is expanding, and that is a good thing. So you can see right here that the economic data for Seattle Public Schools. So you can see a downward shift into your left-hand graph. Now, that downward shift, you would think it was positive because less students are receiving free and reduced lunch, when we actually can see that this is a negative. This downward shift is actually a greater indication of the downward trends of diversity overall in the city, and that has been brought on by the gentrification of certain neighborhoods that were once pretty low income and diverse. Now they are, brand new homes, all of that. So Seattle Public Schools definitely struggles with the diverse population, but also the unhoused population that is being pushed out by these skyrocketing rents and gentrification of certain neighborhoods. Now, 34 out of 113 schools are Title I. These are mostly elementary schools, and Title I schools in Washington State receive extra resources for parents, extra resources for students themselves, such as after-school programs, and extra resources for teachers, such as professional development, that benefit learners in diverse low-income communities. The cultural diversity in Seattle Public Schools, while the actual racial diversity is low, the city itself has a large white population, and the school district is 47% white, so it's pretty prominently white. cultural diversity is celebrated in Seattle Public Schools, however. There is a large focus on the indigenous history of Seattle and the Pacific Northwest, as well as the strong Black communities in Seattle and Greater Washington. So, Seattle Public Schools was actually one of the first school districts to end celebration of Columbus Day and to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day instead. This is a focus and a highlight on the natural environment that Seattle takes for granted, but also the community of people that we have here in Seattle. Only 1% of the student population is Native, but outside of the city, there is a larger Washington population. Seattle Public Schools has also been on the front lines of the Black Lives Matter movement since the beginning. Students have organized walkouts, and teachers have worn shirts in solidarity and support. So, as well as having a week-long Black Lives Matter week every year, where teachers focus heavily on racial injustice and the 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 specific issues focused on the Black community in Seattle. These are some education policy challenges. Now, these aren't only in Seattle, but they are 3 of Seattle's biggest right now. Teacher education programs, overall in Washington, there is a large gap in quality in teacher education programs. There are some that are incredibly immersive, like through University of Washington, the Seattle Teacher Residency Program, where teachers work for they work 4 days a week in Title I schools, so they really understand the diverse population and how to service them as a teacher. Overall, though, there's too much difference in teacher education programs, and it leaves many populations to be underserved. So I believe that there needs to be an overhaul of teacher education programs. There needs to be only in class preparation and in school service in order to get a credential. There also needs to be less focus on standards and learning for the test. There needs to be a focus on learning for the student. Many students are being left behind because their teachers are not of quality. So there really needs to be a change there. I've talked about it before, but universal pre-K has been floated around since the 1970s, and there's one state and a few large U.S. cities that have universal pre-K for every person in the city, every learner. Seattle's is very limited, but expanding. Overall, the policy is incredibly beneficial to low-income families, working families. It allows maybe a family member who was not able to work because of childcare get a job, support their family. So it's something that needs to be passed universally. Hopefully, in the next coming administration, things will be done about universal pre-K. The third focus is the Common Core curriculum. Now, Washington State is one of the states that has held up the Common Core, but there are lots of flaws. I know I've helped students with their homework, and it's not a math or procedure that I recognize through my education. That being said, if you can look to the right, it's an older graph, but it shows you the proficiency level the proficiency measurements in certain states before Common Core and after Common Core. Now, this can mean myriad things. My best guess is that teachers are not understanding how or why to teach Common Core. It's conceptually, it is wonderful and it makes a lot of sense. And for learners that get overwhelmed easily by the large numbers, I see it as a huge benefit. But it is a more complicated way of adding steps to math. So there are lots of complaints to be said. Assistive technology in Seattle Public School classrooms. While only 14.8% of the student population receives special education, much less than that receive financial support to get the assistive technology they need for learning. Through grants and Title I funding, also PTA funding, many schools, regardless of students' disabilities, are investing in things like a smart board or flexible seating. This encourages all learners and all types of learners for greater focus. So it's the assistive technology that is easiest and used for the most students. But there are ways of getting the money needed for severely disabled students and their assistive technologies. So personally, I am not a huge fan of discipline, overly disciplining students. Seattle Public Schools, unfortunately, has a history of racial discrepancy when it comes to discipline. Black and brown students get disciplined at larger rates. So the district itself is doing an overhaul, changing the discipline policy, adding more steps that teachers and students themselves can take before administration or disciplinary action is taken. There are added school psychologists. There are personal self-soothing tools that are encouraged. So overall, discipline, policy, and behavior is shifting in Seattle Public Schools. I believe mastery is a huge motivator for students. So really encouraging learning and encouraging discovery learning is fundamental for every age group. Conflict resolution and mediation in Seattle Public Schools. So while researching the district-wide conflict resolution and mediation underscores, I found a multi-tiered plan for conflict resolution. However, I also found something that was pretty disturbing. There is a pattern of abuse in Seattle Public Schools where teachers are not held accountable for misconduct. And this is at an administrative level, it's at a teacher level, it's at a district level. So when you're able to discipline children at high rates, but the educators themselves, when they do bad things and they are incorrect, are not disciplined, doesn't make me feel good as an educator. And my last slide is talks about collaboration, professional development, and ways that educators build communication and hold each other accountable. This way, if there are missteps, which there are, teachers feel comfortable enough with each other to communicate and mediate those problems. Thank you.